Well, hi, everybody. We're so excited today to welcome Rachel to our podcast. Rachel is mom of two, and her daughter Mimi lives with CDKL5 deficiency disorder. So, welcome, Rachel. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, guys, I'm really thrilled to be here. So, we live in California. We live in Altadena, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. So I live with my husband, Kuba, and Mimi is my oldest. She's 9. And I have a son, Mickey, who is 7. So I have a fourth grader and a second grader. And we have a cat, Kitty, who is currently playing outside.
We're so excited to hear more about Mimi and your life together and your family. Tell us a little bit about your diagnostic journey. How did Mimi get this diagnosis?
In hindsight, I can see that there were issues from day one, but as a new mom, there was a lot I just didn't recognize. When she was 5 days old, she was really floppy. Like, even for a newborn, she didn't want to feed. She was lethargic. I thought, of course, I was panicking. We rushed to the doctor. But then, in the doctor, she pooped and she fed, and it's all fine. And then, week 2 happened and we were edging towards week 3 and she was still jaundiced. But, the doctor said, she's breastfed jaundice. This is normal. It happens with a lot of babies who are breastfed. And then the day after my husband went back to work, she was 3 weeks old and it was a Tuesday. I'm sitting at home with her. We're just like playing on the floor and she did some movements. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But I didn't think anything of it. And then later the same day, she did more of them. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. And then the next morning, my husband left for work and I'm nursing her in bed. And then, she's in my arms and she did this really weird thing. And I was convinced it was not just like something weird. It felt like a seizure, although I had no idea what a seizure was. And then I realized that was the same thing that I'd seen the day before. So that started like an absolute panic, of course. And we were in the ER a little while later. And we were in the hospital for 3 or 4 days. When we were still in the ER, we were being poo-pooed so much by the doctors that we were imagining things and over anxious parents. And but then, of course, they hooked her up to an EEG and it showed that she was having seizures. So we got put on our first seizure med, a Keppra, and thought, oh, yay, this will take care of it. There wasn't a part of me at that time that knew enough about epilepsy to be really worried. Like, oh, here is a neonatal infant having seizures. That's not normal. Although at the same time, I thought she was dying. And I just hated being in the hospital with her. I felt like we got no respect. And, now I understand they were all just really doing their job and that's how it works. But the poking and the prodding, and it's really hard to see your newborn like that because they've just come out of you and they're so defenseless. So we ended up leaving on day 4 because I just couldn't handle being there anymore. And went home thinking like, okay, but we're on Keppra, it's going to be great. And then a day after we got home from the hospital, she had another seizure. And I was like, wait, that wasn't allowed to happen. We're on a med. Fast forward a couple weeks, we're already trying new meds and those are not working. She's having, for us, this was the peak of her seizures. She was having about 8 seizures a day. So we're, back and forth to the neurologist, back and forth to the pediatrician, doing more EEGs. They'd done gene testing when we were in the hospital, but they only did a microarray and it didn't pull anything up. And also because I was inexperienced at that time, I thought that was sufficient. And then they said they wanted to do more intensive testing. And that took a really long time. For some reason, it took about 2 months. So during that time, we're again back and forth to the doctor. When she was about 3 months, my pediatrician, she said, I think you guys should get in touch with a regional center, which here in California is the agency that provides all kinds of disability services. And I'd never heard of regional center. And when I went home and Googled it, I was like, what? No, that can't
How old
be.
was Mimi at this time when they recommended that?
3 months.
Wow, that's shocking to me.
I mean,
Not
she was not making eye contact. She was not smiling properly. She wasn't lifting her head appropriately. She
Is this
wasn't
early
starting to push up.
intervention? Is it early
It's
intervention?
everything. It's everything. But
Oh,
yes,
okay.
among it, the services they offer is early intervention. Yes. Now that's still how we get a lot of our supports, how we get respite, it's how we get some of her therapies, it's how we get diapers, a lot. But yes, early intervention. And then when she was about 4 months old, we got her actual diagnosis. And the doctor, the geneticist called us on a Friday and said, "We'd like you to come in for an appointment. We're not going to tell you what it is over the phone. We don't want you to Google it. We're going to make an appointment for Tuesday." Like, wait, it's Friday. You know what's going on with my kid, and I have to wait until Tuesday to find out what it is. And he said this thing on the phone that I've never forgotten, and I was so angry about for years afterwards. But now I kind of realize I know what he meant, which was at the end of the phone call, he said, "It doesn't change anything we don't already know about Mimi." And then Tuesday we got the diagnosis and I was like, "It changes everything. What are you talking about?" And I think it's like a two-sided from his perspective. First of all, they all knew that a baby having seizures in the neonatal period that is already failing multiple seizure drugs is not a good thing. But then, in hindsight, I've come to realize like it's correct in another ways that Mimi is Mimi. She is my daughter. She's lovely and she's a sprite and she's just spicy and fizzy and full of life. And she has CDKL5 too, but it doesn't change that she's my Mimi. So, but at the time that was really hard. And I remember we went to the appointment, it was December, so like the day gets dark early. And we were the last appointment of the day, and we got the diagnosis, and it wasn't that nice of a doctor. It was the guy who said that to me. And so we just kind of sat there stunned in the appointment when they left, like, wait, what now? And I remember like a part of me felt like she had literally just died then. I didn't understand how I was going to go home and take care of this baby that was alive and needed me and needed to breastfeed, like needed me imminently, who I just felt like I'd been given a death sentence for. I just felt, even if she didn't actually die, I'd been told like all these things that I couldn't process. And I couldn't believe I still had to go home and be a mom. I wasn't sure I felt like one anymore. Um, we spent like a week in bed with her. And then, it's a very, very slow process, but you start living. The first year was medically the hardest. And I think it doesn't even compare to the experiences of some other parents with CDKL5. But, we were getting regular EEGs. So we were in the hospital kind of often, and we tried so many drugs, and she developed infantile spasms. And it was a stressful year for sure. But, life moves on. The sun comes up the next day, and you find a way.
I can relate to it's really interesting because the jaundice and the eye contact are like the first things that we started having conversations about for my Ava, right? And I didn't get diagnosed nearly as early, so I can't relate to any of that. But after the initial shock and you got back to life, like what did you think was going to happen? Or did you have, for me it was like, is she going to die? Is she not? There was no prognosis. They knew very little. So I had no idea what to expect, but we'd made it, 6.5 years. In your position, where did you think you were going?
I had no idea, honestly. She was 4 months old, so a 4-month-old doesn't do that much anyways. And I wanted answers then. I needed them to give me every answer and tell me exactly how it was going to be. Of course, they wouldn't. And then I started reading more about CDKL5. And at the time, the information was very limited, actually. It was just a very not sophisticated website, and that was kind of it. But it didn't sound good. And I just couldn't really imagine how it could be that this baby that's in front of me is not going to grow up the way I imagined she would. And then I joined the CDKL5 parent support group that's on Facebook and started reading all these really difficult stories. And I guess I assumed that that's exactly how it would go. And I tried to brace myself for that. But Mimi has grown up in a totally different way. And on some levels, we're unbelievably lucky on that front. She's healthy as a horse. She has a better immune system than any of us because she puts everything in her mouth. It's also why her teeth are so pearly white, even though it's difficult to brush them because she's like brushing them all day long. But the challenges we do face are ones that I really could not have imagined. I joined the parents group, and most of what I saw is so different from what we actually struggle with. And of course, it took a number of years for it to develop that way because she was a baby and she was, babies are inscrutable, right? We have no idea what's going to happen with them, as I've also learned with my son. So yeah, we're in a very different place now than what I could remotely have pictured when she was a baby.
When did you start to notice that, I think maybe my daughter's going to be doing some things that I don't see other kids doing necessarily?
Even when she had infantile spasms and was really pretty out of it, she still played a little bit. She still reached for things a little bit, and she worked really hard on getting herself to learn to relearn rolling back over a couple months into still having spasms. When she was 8 months old, we started her on CBD, and it was amazing for her. Unfortunately, it didn't last forever, but it was amazing for her, and she was seizure free. In the end, she was seizure free for over 2 years. But in the beginning, you didn't know, how long it was going to last. But the minute the spasms stopped, she sat up like the next week, and she was trying to do everything after that. Took her much longer than typically developing kids, but she maintained the seizure freedom. And then I think around 15 months old, she started crawling. And then quickly after that, she was pulling herself to stand. She took her first steps at 2. At 2.5, really properly started walking. And she was just on the go from the minute she could move. And so I already understood that we were on a little bit of a different journey from that perspective. But I think the thing that really doesn't get discussed enough is there is this category of kiddos, and mine is among them, that are both physically relatively able, but functionally extremely disabled. And the physical ability actually makes the functional disability so much harder. So, for years when I was more active in the parents group on Facebook, I would get these messages from new parents. What therapies did you do? How do I make my daughter walk? And, you can't do that. It's not anything I've done. Mimi's specific mutation affects her in the specific way that allows her to walk. And it's not because I'm a marvelous mother. And if your child doesn't walk, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because their mutation doesn't allow them to learn that. It's that simple. But I would get these messages from these parents who just looked at like some happy pictures of Mimi and saw what they wanted to see. And the reality of it was extremely different. I was not prepared for the level of danger that she poses to herself and for how vigilant and on guard we were going to need to be, and how, despite our vigilance, her ability means that sometimes she gets past those defenses and puts herself in a lot of danger. Our front door is always locked. And then beyond that, on our porch, we have another gate that we keep locked. And then we have like street access via our driveway through an alley. And we have 2 gates there, one which has a lock that's covered and one which is a lock that's out of her reach. But people are human. And sometimes something happens. And on the day that she got out, I actually wasn't home at the time. And people who were at home were doing home repairs, fix-it stuff. And one thought one was outside the fence, and it was not that way. And she managed to slip through the gate, and her absence was noted within like 2-3 minutes, but she was already out of view. So where'd she go? They ended up calling the sheriff. And I don't know that the sheriff would have been able to locate her, except that she had gone to our local park. And people there were noticing that there's a child here who really should not be by herself. And so they called the sheriff. And so then they were able to put 2 and 2 together. A witness said that Mimi just ran across the road in front of a truck. Doesn't see it, is not aware, and mostly that experience left me with extreme trauma. Sometimes still like wake up in bed thinking about it. Um, but there's a tiny part of me that's proud of her. She's just so determined to get out in the world and see it all and explore it. And she knew her way. She knew where she was going. And she wanted to go to the park and she went to the park. So there's a part of me that's just proud of her. But the lack of awareness, it's so dangerous for her. I think that if, magic happened and she decided to turn for home, that she would have known her way home. I do. But the number of things that could happen to her on the way is just too much to even think about. We face these kind of dangers with her all the time. No other stories of her getting out of the house, but just the things that you haven't yet predicted she's going to get into, the things that you haven't yet predicted she's going to learn how to do. And so we live this life of ever increasing locks, gates, new rules. We don't know what's next. And that's a very different kind of what's next than a lot of other families. But so I couldn't have predicted it.
No.
Well, and there's danger. My child probably isn't going to go to the park, but she can get out of bed. She can get into knives. I think it's really hard for people to understand that these kids know what they know. And when they want to do something, when they have buy in, they're going to lock in on that. But to say, can't you teach your kid to look both ways? Like this is not our reality. There's no amount of therapy or, a lot of people think ABA therapy, would that help? No, we could do something 20 times over and she doesn't care because that's not how her brain works.
We're all in this like interconnected web of somehow keeping Mimi safe, somehow giving Mimi freedom. And the rest of us just have to form that wall. And sometimes that's tough. And like other people come over to our house. I'm like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. Can't do that. And I feel like sometimes I think they've stepped into an alternative reality in our house.
Yeah, it's I think no matter
Surrender.
no, right.
That's
No
what I
matter
always call it. At the end of the day, I have to surrender to, to the reality I live in. I'm not in control of most all of it, really. But
Right. I'm not in control.
right.
And
I
she,
think
she's in control and she's not in control either.
exactly. I think no matter where your child falls on the spectrum of CDKL5, every single one of us as caretakers can identify with the hypervigilance for whatever it is that you're always on top of. You're always on top of it. And this idea of you are making your house that in a way that works for your kid, whether you want to or not, to the detriment or betterment of your other kids or not, to the detriment or betterment of your relationship with your spouse or whatever or not. I mean, it's just how it has to be because of safety, because of you have to find a way to make this manageable for you every day, every night, 24 hours. And I don't think it's how any of us would want our households to run. But no matter what our challenges are, we are beholden to that.
Our whole house is set up around Mimi. We have these like child safety knobs that make it so she can't open the doors on my closet because she loves to go in my closet and play with my jewelry and my bags, on the bathroom so that you don't necessarily have to be walked in on, and on my son's room because, he's developing and he deserves his own space and privacy. And he has a lot of things in there that would be highly breakable and Mimi wouldn't mean to break them, but he also wouldn't be happy about it. And so those are the spaces that are off limits to her if we want them to be off limits to her. And the rest of it is all hers. There's no, that's Mimi's room. That's my room. No, it's all Mimi's. So, and everything here is set up for her. I want to have it be as much of a yes environment as possible. And I want her to feel free in her space and be able to roam as much as possible. It's very difficult for her to roam outside the house. And so I try to make this as free a space for her. And we all just have to make that room and accommodate.
How does your son manage or deal, do you think? I mean, he's only 7. How do you think this has been his reality too, right?
Yeah, it's been his reality. I think back to that original question of what did you expect when having another kid? And first of all, sometimes we define parenting a CDKL5 child too much as something unique when actually most aspects of parenting them, it's really the same. It's really the same. I mean, you love your child, you care for your child, you give them attention, you give them comfort, you make sure they have what they need, you see that they are unique individuals, and maybe the specific way you do it is different, but it's the same. And I couldn't have predicted who my son is any more than I could have predicted who Mimi is. And he's given me a lot of perspective about that. And I can't control him either. And especially as he's getting older. My first year with him was actually probably harder than my first year with Mimi. Mimi was not interested in him, and she was loud and she could be rough. And so he wanted to stay away from her. And those are kind of entrenched roles that they're in now. And he likes to carve out his own space. And I know he adores her, but he's apprehensive around her. And the older he gets and the more his behavior conforms to societal expectations, and he learns how to be quiet and how to sit still and all these things, her behaviors get harder for him to handle. She's very loud, very, very loud. And sometimes it's to the point that he cries, even now, and gets really overwhelmed, or he'll storm off. And, I get it. She's my girl, and I'll hang with her through anything. And I've learned to sort of don't let it ruffle your feathers, because if you do, there's no end to it. She doesn't mean to hurt my ears, or maybe sometimes she does, but she doesn't mean to behave the way she does. And that's not the perspective that a 7-year-old can have. Now I accept it for what it is, but we spend a lot of time in a really divided framework. My son has a million things that he's involved in out in the world, and so many friends and activities, and Mimi can't come for any of them. So somebody's at home with Mimi, and somebody's out with Mickey, somebody's traveling with Mickey, and someone's home with Mimi missing a trip. But we try to give him as much space and ways to find himself outside our home as possible. He's going to go to sleepaway camp this next summer for the first time. He's so excited. But I know not every parent sends their kid to sleepaway camp right after second grade. And for me, it's a priority. Get him out there and get him into a space where he doesn't have to be the sibling of a very loud disabled kid, and where he can do the things that other people are doing that feel normal. And yeah, we're divided a lot. Not emotionally, but physically, we're split up a lot. And time at home can be hard, so I just try to give him as much time out of the house as possible.
I feel like he's approaching that age, like for us around age 8. Ava's sibling is also younger. I guess I would offer that once she got a little bit older and in the high school years, she's carved her own way. She is also not as stressed about who her sister is, and she can find her identity outside of our family, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe is the best way to put it. So, I just want to offer that it's terrible during the upper grade school and middle school years. It's just hard because they're trying to figure it out, and everything is so different. And, their peers really get curious, and sometimes in a way that's not, nice. And it's just kid curiosity. But
I mean, we've had kids come over to play with my son who have been not nice to or about Mimi. And I think their behavior is normal. That's how kids react to things that are really different. They're not always charming and graceful and about it. But it's hard to have kids in your own home make you feel bad about your kid. Not ashamed, but it hurts. It hurts, and it's happening in my house. I know we have a humongous experience ahead that's going to be challenging. If we want to do real talk, Mimi masturbates all the time. And her brother has not yet figured out what she's doing. And when he figures out that she's sitting next to him masturbating, or that she's in public masturbating, that's going to be really hard. And we've been working on getting her to not in public since she was 2. So it's probably futile. She's 9. And what is going to happen when he realizes that that's what she's doing sitting at dinner next to him is something that I'm not looking forward to that discussion. And I know it's probably coming sooner than I wanted to.
So
And
we have a saying at our house, and it's "That's not a pocket, Ava." And so, maybe you could think of something like that to offer. But for the real talk aspect of it, like hopefully once she goes through puberty, it gets better. I feel like it's cyclical now, but anyway, that's not
Does
a
that
pocket.
stop her? Does that redirect her? That statement, does that redirect Ava
She
away from
knows
the
exactly
behavior?
what we're she knows what the expectation is. Is she gonna honor that or not? Likely not. But
Mm.
she knows exactly. When I say that's not a pocket, she looks at me. So
yeah,
it doesn't necessarily stop her, but it cues her in on that. She shouldn't be doing that. The therapists were like, just give her a time. And I'm like, well, she'd do it all the time. So I'm like,
yeah,
that's not a pocket and for your room. So anyway.
we had early on in our experience with that, we had therapists say, teach her to do it in her room. And I would say, you see this house? That's her room. We do call it Mimi time now, and we tell her, like, Mimi time is only if you're a room. Here, let's go to your room and close the door. And she's immediately comes out and does it with us again because she likes to be with us. But my son recently said, so it's called Mimi time when she does that? And I was like, oh dear. Oh no.
Rachel, does she do it at school? How do they handle it at school?
So she does do it at school. She doesn't do it when she's busy. So if she's having fun doing something else, she's not doing that. But like, unfortunately, a lot of times group situations, we're at the dinner table, or she's sitting on the couch with us, or anything that puts her in a seated position. So if we put her in her stroller to go
Yeah,
out,
in
which is the
public.
only safe way to take her out, that's what she's doing in her stroller the whole time. So I think it's just much less of an issue at school, although they do address it. But she's usually busy and having fun. If she's running around my backyard, she's not doing it. If she's on her bike, she's not doing it.
It's constant redirection when they're doing it. It's the only way to stop it. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. If somebody is providing them with the stimulus they need, they're not doing that. But it's impossible to break it. I mean, it's in the chair. Like, I am always watching her in public. I'm always watching for an elbow. I'm always watching to see like a shoulder drop or something, because I know then her
Yeah,
hands are in her. And people freak out. Like, they look at you
yeah,
like you have snakes coming out of your eyes or something. Um, I seen recently some people referring to that, and maybe the Epilepsy Foundation had something of self gratification, they call it, and I'm like, it's masturbation. It is received that way. Like, I don't think we could pretty this up with language. So anyhow,
yeah, yeah. I don't like to pretty anything up with language. It's just I get so mad when people say special needs. Don't give me a euphemism. This life is hard and it deserves real labels. And those labels are not an insult. She is disabled.
they're describing their descriptors.
Yeah, she is disabled and she's marvelous. Those two things can be true, but there's nothing about her that's special needs.
Rachel, tell us about getting out in the community with her and what that looks like.
It's a humongous challenge. She wants to be out in the world. She is always trying to get out of our house. If she smells that we might be doing anything to approach leaving, packing snacks, brushing teeth, that is a trigger for her that we are going to leave, and she needs it to happen now. But then once you get out, of course, we don't really know what she wanted to do. She's not able to communicate that to us in any way. So I never know if I'm taking her to go do the wrong thing. But I think most of the time it's just her mood changes every couple minutes. Something that's making her happy at 1 minute is not necessarily going to make her happy the next. When she decides she's unhappy, it's immediate and very forceful. There's just this level of unpredictability. She could be having a really hard time in the house, and you're debating, do I take her out or do I not take her out? Will it make her feel better? Will it not? And you have no way to predict. She might be doing so hard in the house, you get out and she's wonderful. So hard in the house, you get out, no, it's still so hard. Or great in the house, you go out and she's great. Or great in the house and you go out and it's hard. We can't take her anywhere that we need to be stationary. She does not want to sit in her stroller. She's willing to be pushed in her stroller. So if I need to stop in a coffee line, it's hard. If I need to take her into the post office, that's too long. She can't wait. So things like meeting friends for dinner, or going to a birthday party in the park or anywhere is just not feasible. Um, and her behaviors are really intense. And they're intense in a way that I'm not embarrassed about them. I don't care what other people think, and they're still not socially acceptable. I can't bring someone to a restaurant who is going to shout at the top of her lungs, bite herself, scream, kick the table, and masturbate. I can't, you know? It's not fair to other people, actually. As much as I want to stand up for her, that's not fair to other people. I can't bring her to my synagogue to do that. I do bring her in once a year on the holiest day of the year. We have this very special thing that we do in our synagogue where each family gets to go up to the ark that holds the Torah scrolls as a unit. And I'll have my husband bring her in for that. We go last. He comes in right at the end, and it's still really hard. She can't manage. She can't manage. And if she was going to stay for any period of time, I would also have to do what she wants to do, which is leave, which is pull the tablecloth off the table with all the stuff on it, which is go on the stage, which is walk wherever she wants to walk and pick up whoever's bag she wants to stim with or whoever's coat she wants to chew on. And I can't socialize, I can't interact, I can't hang out with my son, I can't get myself a drink, I can't let go of her hand, I can't go to the bathroom. So most of the time we don't go out with her. It's just really, really difficult. And I've had people tell me like, "Oh, we'll find a way to make it happen." And I tell them, "No, you don't get it. It's not going to happen." And I think sometimes I get judged even by people in the disability community that I'm not exposing my daughter to the world. I don't care about inclusion, but there's a misconception about what inclusion really looks like. And inclusion for Mimi would be being able to let her roam safely, having a skilled, dedicated caregiver to walk around with her and keep her safe wherever she wants to go, which is not where anybody else wants to go. She doesn't want to join a little music circle. She doesn't want to sit for story time. She doesn't want to sit at the table and enjoy company. She wants to get into things that are dangerous and can hurt her or can break or, and the challenge is that she wants to get out. She isn't happy at home. She's not a homebot. And figuring out how to get her out even for a hike can be difficult. But we keep trying because she wants it, and I want to make it happen for her.
It's hard when people want you to come out and do something, and all we can do is that line of sight. It's not fun. It's work. I do not enjoy it. I don't want to try it anymore because I am the one who has to facilitate. You don't get to talk to anybody. You're doing nothing but management of this child's behaviors. So I get it. It's easier to be at home. And if that makes me a terrible person, like until the world is ready to tolerate vocal stim or give us support to either have respite where they're doing something in an enriched environment for them where we can divide and conquer, as more family units, or, help these children get out into the community.
Yeah.
And I should say adults too. It's not just, kids.
I think, the people who make those kind of judgments, though, they have no idea what it's actually like. They do not know my child. They do not know her needs. They do not know how to help her enjoy herself. And they're really judging from a place of ignorance. So if we do get out with Mimi, it's always something that we've decided we can give her 100% of our attention for. So, we'll try a hike. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're not. But because we're planning to focus on her, if it's not, okay, we go home, or we'll try the playground. Same, if it's good, great. If it's not, go home, the beach, whatever. But I don't attempt to take her anywhere anymore where I'm actually trying to socialize or support my other kid or what have you. Those situations just don't work. And especially with my son, if I tell him that he's going to get to go to a party and then 5 minutes in he has to leave, that's really hard. So, but I'm always trying. And my husband, he has gotten so inventive for her. He's built her many iterations of these custom bike trailers. He bought himself, he likes e-biking, and he has a beater e-bike that he takes her out on because the trailer definitely, it does damage to the bike. And he's constantly modifying it, figuring out ways to make it better and cooler. And that is something that they can share that she loves that actually I can't provide her. No, only my husband can do that for her. And we also bought a huckleberry, which is this new thing where an adult straps something onto them and essentially acts as a Sherpa for the kid. They're pulling a chair behind them. And whenever we do take Mimi out in this, we get stopped by everyone. People who have nothing to do with disability. What is that? That is so cool. Tell me all about it. But that's hard work. She's over 50 pounds and it's hard work. And she doesn't always enjoy it either. So sometimes you can put all this work in and it's still a fail. And that's hard also for him. But he just keeps inventing and iterating and trying to figure out things that can be fun for her. So, I mean, seriously, hats off to him because I don't know how to do any of that. I don't tinker. I don't use tools. And what I bring to her life is different for sure. She's
That's
a speed
awesome.
demon. Sometimes we joke that it's actually better that she has CDKL5 because if she was neurotypical, she would like already have broken her back doing loop-de-loops and snowboarding or whatever, and she would be doing X Games or, Red Bull challenges. So we've probably been saved from that by the CDKL5.
From your perspective, what at this time is your family's biggest unmet need or needs?
Hands-on support. We are very lucky to live in California, that provides some of the most extensive and wraparound support for families living with disability. But just for example, we get an unbelievable number of respite hours. I think we get over 100 respite hours a month. But how do you use that? Who provides the respite? So at the present time, our respite worker is my mother-in-law, who's amazing with my daughter, by the way. But, if my mother-in-law is providing respite, well, then that means she can't come with us to whatever we're planning to do. And there's so many times where I wish we could all be together, but she's home. And, we've tried outside respite workers in the past. The ones you get from an agency do not belong with my daughter. They do not belong with my daughter. End of story. And they didn't when she was 3 or 4, which is the last time we tried working with people from an agency. And she's so much more challenging today. I absolutely would not put her with someone like that. If you want to hire someone better than that with more skills, respite's minimum wage. I'm going to have to start paying an additional $20 an hour on top of that to find somebody who'd really be qualified to support my daughter. And given the hours that we would need, I can't afford that, and we really do need someone qualified if we want to try bringing her anywhere. So support hours, but like actually being able to staff them because, we get them, we have them, and we can't use them except with my mother-in-law. I already think, how is she going to attend my son's 8th grade graduation? How is she going to attend his bar mitzvah? What are we going to do during his bar mitzvah? Who is going to care for Mimi? Who's going to bring her at that one moment to take that one photo? And how are we all going to be together as a family? And of course, I'm not going to ask anyone to stay home either. So, I don't know how to manage these situations. I don't have the staff. We did have nannies for a couple years, but we went through many, and there was always a very long training period. When they left, it would be very traumatic because what are we going to do? And you have a life set up for having a nanny and then you have nothing. And, that was always really challenging. And they weren't that qualified either, and I had to step in all the time when things got unmanageable. So support. And there are so many more places that I could take my daughter if I knew I had that second pair of hands who was not family, right? Like sometimes my mother-in-law does bring Mimi along somewhere, but then she's not a participant. She's a caregiver. And that's extremely different. The other thing that I need feels like the most ridiculous request because it's so blatantly never going to happen. But there are things in this world that Mimi would love. And if she was allowed to access them in her way, she could participate. So just for example, I think she would love fireworks. And we live right by the Rose Bowl, which is a famous 100,000 person stadium. They put on a humongous 4th of July fireworks show every year. Well, you can watch this two ways. You can get a ticket and go to the Rose Bowl, or you could find, LA is very hilly, so you can find some good vantage spot and watch from there. We tend to do the find a vantage spot. I don't know how much the tickets are, but that involves other people find the good spots too. There's a crowd. You have to get there early. You have to be prepared to sit and wait on the side of a trail for hours. And for my son, that's fun. He's running around with the other kids that are there also. And, you're just sitting there with whoever you're sitting there with, having a good time talking. But my daughter can't do that. And then you're also probably a little bit far from the fireworks. If I could, as to the Rose Bowl, it fits so many people that they close all the roads and they bus people in. Or you could pay some extraordinary amount for parking. We can't easily just drive up there. If I could drive to the front gate of the Rose Bowl, skip all the music, and let her walk onto the field under the fireworks right when they were going to start, she would love it. She would love it. There's no way for me to facilitate. The world does not work that way, and there's so many other things, certain rides, gentle rides at theme parks, or, water type parks, stuff like this, that like if we could just walk in and walk out, great, she'd love it. But the way it actually functions doesn't work for her. When she was younger, we would try taking her to those kind of like kids museums or kids play spaces, and I would have to pay to go in, she would have to pay to go in, and I would sometimes say, I don't know if she's going to be able to access anything in here, and we may only stay 5 minutes. Is there any way you could not charge her, or that, we could get a refund if we do have to leave within 5 minutes, not within an hour, but like within 5 minutes? And we always would get the answer no, so I would pay to go somewhere with her, and we would turn around right after we paid. But nobody really, it's not that the individual person who's telling you no has no compassion. It's just nobody at the top envisions what these experiences are like, and that there's only one way for a person like Mimi to access things. The world's not set up for her. I would love it if, she's been given this really hard challenge in life. If somebody could just give her a golden ticket so that she could access things, that's something I would love for her. And I think the last thing that I would throw in there as well is really trained therapists working in lots of domains. So for example, we get hours from Regional Center for adaptive swim lessons. We brought somebody to our house who was a gymnastics teacher, thinking that maybe they would be able to work with her doing gymnastics because she's very bendy and she loves to play in certain ways. And I thought, this might be fun for her. Of course, that person is not trained in working with people with disabilities. And as much as I tried to explain, give her a break, approach it this way, it's not a fit. There are so many activities I think my daughter would love trying, but there's no formal therapy system for that. And so we're limited to swim. That's our one choice. I would love to see adaptive programs everywhere. I would love for people to understand that kids living with challenges like Mimi still want to do everything, and their ability to do it is very small, and the support they need is humongous. But if you could get even 5 minutes for her, she'd love it. And those programs just don't exist. So
Society-wise, I feel like it's moving along in the nearly 20 years I've been here, but we're indivisible because, by design. It's just easier, access and inclusivity. We haven't gotten there yet. And hopefully we continue moving that way. But
we hope.
Education isn't even, I think kids are much more accepting nowadays than 20 years ago of kids with differences, but I still think there's just a big gap in our society of an understanding gap, maybe.
Yeah. I know I knew nothing about disability. Most of us who end up in this life didn't before our kids were born. And you think you know what disability looks like. Maybe you imagine a kid with autism having a really big meltdown. Or maybe you imagine a kid with a lot of physical disabilities in a wheelchair. First of all, you don't know what the back end of that looks like. And second of all, those aren't the only two modalities, and there's so much incredible variety because we're talking about people, obviously. It's all going to be different. And the world can't imagine unless you can, which is us.
Rachel, what would you say to somebody who's newly receiving this diagnosis?
Give yourself a lot of grace. It took me a long time to find my footing again. A long time. And it took me a long time to have that rubber band that got pulled kind of snap back into place. And for me to learn how to still thrive and work on myself and figure out who I am and do things I want to do. It took me a long time to realize I still needed to parent my daughter and not just caregive, but to actually be her mom. And didn't figure out what that looked like. So give yourself a lot of grace. It's impossible, but try not to have any preconceptions. You don't know where it's going to take you. When Mimi was newly diagnosed, I had so many people tell me, like, she'll write her own story. And I really wasn't ready to hear that. I didn't know what that meant. I thought I had been told how the story was going to go, and I thought I was seeing how the story was going to go. And I didn't realize how much of her own person she was going to be, and how much, in the one sense, she has no agency, right? But like how much agency she had in her personality and her expressiveness and her forcefulness. And she's doing her thing all the time. She's being her. And I just assigned so much passivity to it in the beginning. And her disability, that's, if you just see that, that's a lie about her. She's so much more than that. But it took me a while to get there. It took me a while to realize I still needed to be her mom. Try to work on that resilience muscle. You're going to need it. You don't know when you're going to need it. You don't know how you're going to need it. Those would probably be my top 3 things.
Well, I think this was so great. We're so happy to have you on and sharing about your experiences and your life. Yeah, it really is, right? I'm so excited for people to listen to your story and Mimi's story and hear what feedback people have and questions.
I can't wait to hear what other people have to say too. I'm really looking forward to listening.
Yeah, me too. Hey, Rachel, what's your favorite color?
It's either purple or green.
Awesome.
Just pick either. I like both of them.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll follow us on social media at CDKL5 in color on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and visit us online at cdkl5incolor.com. Have questions or a topic you'd like us to chat about? Would you like to be a guest on our podcast? Email us cdkl5incolor@gmail.com, and we'll be in touch. Until next time.